Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Quantum Wealth Podcast. I'm really excited for today's conversation because this is one that I've wanted to have for a long time. And so I'm so excited to introduce Christina Giovanna Olivarez today as our guest, who is a leadership expert, visibility queen. So, Christina, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us all about yourself.
First, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited for this conversation. If you are meeting me for the first time, I am Christina Giovanna Olivarez. I am an award-winning leadership coach, a business strategist, TEDx speaker. I just recently celebrated 11 years in business, and I work in the intersections of visibility, authority positioning, authority branding, and leadership. I have coached thousands of Latina and women of color founders since 2015, which is insane to think of how long it's been. It just feels like yesterday I started my company. But I think it's just really important to have these conversations because leadership is embedded in our foundations as a founder. And I feel like one of the things that I have come to realize is that you can build a business, but the business is really going to build you as the leader.
Totally. I feel like every entrepreneur, if they don't know that already, they figure that out along the way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So 11 years of business, congrats. That is huge.
Thank you.
And I know when you hit the decade mark in business, you said it was one of the hardest years, which I feel like a lot of people at
Mhm.
that point would be like, "Oh, you've gotten your flow, like things are going." Can you tell us a little bit
Mhm.
about that?
Absolutely. At moments and times, you are going to have the most incredible milestones, and then life is just going to kick you in the butt and give you all of the lifing is lifing. When I hit 10 years in business, back up a little bit to 2023, my husband unfortunately was laid off of his job. And so my business became the breadwinner of the family. It was sustaining us for the time until he found a new job. And unfortunately, it took him about 2.5 to 3 years to finally find a job in his industry. And at the time, I had two different businesses. I had my coaching business and I had a conference that I had worked on for the last 7 years. And I think that when we think about expansion, immediately we think of go big or go home. And at that time frame, that's exactly what I was doing. All at the same time, I have been struggling with fertility issues and recently went under surgery to remove 6 uterine fibroids from my uterus that were the size of a grapefruit. And so when you collectively look at all of that, plus expanding your business, there was just so much that was going on internally that my nervous system was not able to handle. And that was a huge light bulb moment for me because immediately what I thought was expansion and incredible numbers and the revenue could not sustain it. I couldn't hold it. And I took a hit. On top of that, we're experiencing the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my conference falls under that. And so I lost a lot of funding for my conferences. Sponsors were not willing to put up money for anything that had the word women in it or Latina, anything that was just in that realm. And so I was dealing with so much that I had to take a step back and really think about what do I want to build in the second decade of my business, because I've done so much already in that first decade, but a lot of it was for the validation, for the approval, for the people pleasing. For the first time in my life, I finally said, if no one was watching, what would I want to build? And I feel that's where I'm in that realm right now.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. And thank you so much for being so vulnerable and honest. I'm sure you've spoken about this publicly before because you're a speaker and because you're obviously so comfortable about it. But I think that that's something that needs to be said. And especially as women, there's so much going on in our lives. There's so many responsibilities and hats that we wear that it needs to be validated. I've had a few different business coaches tell me like life is always going to life. And I always thought that was
Yeah.
like dismissive. It's like, yes, and also that doesn't mean we just push through, right? Like sometimes you have to
Right.
honor where you're at. And I think that's really important. So
Yeah.
I commend you for that. So tell
Thank
me a
you.
little bit about like you went from social media management to coaching to visibility. Tell me how that all unfolded.
I originally wanted to be a television news reporter. So all my life, I just wanted to be on Good Morning America. That was my goal as a college student, as a kid, really. I went to college for broadcasting and did all the things that they tell you to do, get the internships, network, do the job shadow. And when I came out of college, no one would hire me. I was either told by news directors that I didn't look the part. I was either typecast, if you will, for the Spanish news stations, but unfortunately, my Spanish was not on par to what they needed. I had to cut my hair. There was just so many things that I was told that I was too much. And this was at a time where social media was starting to become more relevant for the way that we market. This was 2013, 14. So if you can go back to all of way back then, we had Facebook, Instagram was starting to come out, but there wasn't necessarily a way of marketing on Instagram because it was just pictures. But I saw that there was a gap in the way that these established businesses were marketing, and I knew that they could really tap into social media to be able to do that. So I was one of the first people here in San Antonio, Texas, that realized that you need a social media plan, you need a social media strategy. So for the first, I would say 5 to 6 years of my business journey, I was running a social media management firm. I had all different types of clients from restaurants to fashion boutiques to events. This was at a time where influencer marketing was really starting to come up. And so I was managing a team of influencers for the one of the biggest events here in our city. That's a nationwide event. It's called Fiesta San Antonio. And I won awards for my strategies and the work that I was doing. But while I was doing this, every time I worked with a woman owned business, I was recognizing that it wasn't their fear of social media that was not allowing them to market themselves and put themselves out there. It was more internally. And it was all about the ways that they viewed their own visibility and the ways that they viewed their own brand. And that was where I said, I love social media so much. There's something bigger here. And every single time I would work with anybody, I was like, tell me more. I could tell that I was really wanting to mentor and coach and advise these women. And so after the pandemic, that is what I did. I transitioned into more of a coaching company, but right when I was doing social media, I had launched a conference because I saw that there was that gap specifically for Latina founders. Around the time that I launched the coaching company, I also took full 100% ownership of my conference because I had it with my best friend who left the company to run for office. And so it merged into this coaching and conference hybrid company, if you will. And then finally last year, I said, you know what, let's go full in on the coaching. And so I feel like I've seen so many of these businesses utilize social media, but more so to develop their personal brand, which was such an incredible way for me to pivot and something that I find so much passion around.
I love it. That's such a good story. And so, do you do the conference at all, or is it just the coaching now?
Right now, at this moment in time, it is just the coaching. I put the conference on pause after last year, after I experienced complete burnout. And I think it's beautiful to say, I don't really know what I'm going to do with it. And that's the amazing part about being a founder is you get to decide what you want to do next. And right now, I feel like the best thing that I could do for myself is take a pause and recalibrate and what the new gaps are in this new economy that we're in this new realm of my own business journey. Because when I started the conference, I was 27 years old and now I'm 35. So it's a completely different phase of my own evolution. And that's what I'm really excited about. So right now it's just one-on-one
Yeah.
coaching.
Oh, I love that. That's so awesome. And I just love the again that awareness of like I have to put me first in order to help anyone and I have to take care of
Hmm.
me. And I think it's probably because you've had
Yeah.
all these evolutions as an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and Latinas are interesting because we come from a generational line of, and so many women in our ancestry, they gave and gave, and community is a backbone. And I do feel like one of the things that really came to me was I have to put me first before I can give. Because if my livelihood is not sustained, then how can I give back to my community? And I want every single entrepreneur to know that, yes, what you do is incredible, but make sure that you put you first.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to hear you reflect that because it's so important. And even though we all like know it, quote unquote, know it, we forget it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the reason I wanted to bring you on, and I just love how like the socials and the internet that brought us together, is because
Yeah.
something that I see a lot with my clients is that they are growing and scaling their business and they don't necessarily have experience with leadership with a lot of visibility and they're segueing into a different position, right? Because being a solopreneur and doing everything
Hmm.
yourself is a very different business model than leading a team and
Yeah.
being a CEO. And I realized
Hmm.
as a coach in my own like reflection is I actually come from managing a lot of people. So for me, it's just second nature. It comes really naturally. I've hired hundreds and hundreds of people. And so that was a gap I was seeing with my clients that like the leadership wasn't as second nature to them as it was to me. So I thought that this would be such a good conversation to bring someone in who specializes in that to have this conversation.
Hmm.
So tell me about your experience with leadership and being a solopreneur. I know you have an interesting journey and story there.
Yeah. I feel that one of the things that I see with my clients is a lack of self trust in themselves. Number one, across the board. I feel like when you are a solopreneur and you are trying to make the transition into managing a team, one of the first things that you really have to understand first is your leadership style. How do you lead? And then also, what does it look like to bring people onto your team that have different strengths that you might not have? Because as solopreneurs, we are so used to doing every single thing and doing all the hats. And the biggest gap, too, is delegation. And so I feel like anytime I'm coaching one of my clients, I do a lot of strength findings, making sure that you know your strengths and understanding who do you need on your team, whether it is a board of directors that you are trying to have, maybe hiring that first contractor, because some people forget that you can make a jump and not have to deal with a full-time employee, but you can hire a contractor. But do you have your systems and processes in place? I can't tell you how many founders I coach that don't even have a written down process of all the things that they do in their business, from the marketing to the sales. And so that's the gap that I see a lot. And a lot of it too has to deal with their identity. How do they identify as a decision maker? How do they identify as somebody who can lead themselves? Because the lack of self trust comes from there. Speak for me, I know that I am not great with managing a team. I've done it before. I've had a couple of contractors, and then I had one employee. It didn't go well. And that was just because I think I went too fast and not understanding what do I actually need. Because I think when we think about having a team or just being that leader, the biggest bottleneck we see is understanding how to manage different personalities. And I wasn't ready for that. And I think for me too, my own evolution as a leader, when we're thinking about just a solopreneur, is understanding how to continue to lead yourself when things are not going right. And many founders that I work with, they automatically feel like if something is not going well, then you got to hurry up and pivot or you got to burn everything down. And that's where it's like, hey, let's calm down a bit. Let's see what is going on. And that takes time. But I feel those are the things that I see in my own evolution and then the clients that I work with.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who hires someone and like either it's not working out, maybe they made the wrong hire, they're dropping the ball as like a leader? What advice do you give your clients if they're in that situation?
Number one, we have to figure out how you lead. What is your leadership style? Number two, I'm huge on human design. And so I always go back to that of what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And if you make a bad hire, it's okay. This is all learning experience. So now you can apply everything that you learned in that aspect, or having the, hey, this didn't work out, we're not going to do it this way. I feel like sometimes we automatically think that, and of course all these decisions, they do come with financial risks, but unfortunately that is entrepreneurship, that is owning a business. What you can do now is apply the lessons that you've learned and completely say, hey, for this next iteration, I am not going to do XYZ because this didn't work out. I think a lot of it has to deal with feeling ashamed and embarrassed, which is all these internal feelings that you feel that don't even have to do with your fuck
Yeah.
ups, right? Because at the same time, you are going to make mistakes. A lot of it has to deal with managing the self
Hmm.
first. And so I feel that's what I would say to any client that I would be coaching is we have to work first on letting go of the shame. And something that we don't talk a lot about is the grief, because there is grief in making mistakes. There is grief in thinking that you would be here at a certain time in your business and you're not. And those are the two things that I feel is the shame and the grief that we have to think about as business owners, of actually moving through and then figuring out how to overcome those
Yeah.
things.
Oh, the grief is such a good one because I haven't heard it framed that way. How do you move through that grief of like, oh, I'm not where I want to be?
I'm going through that right now, and it is the most uncomfortable and painful experience because I do feel like we look to the internet and we look to our colleagues and we look to people thinking that that's the life that I want, or that's where I should be. I can't tell you how many times I have used, oh, I should have been here by now. I should have been doing this. Like, why am I 11 years in and still struggling, right? It's all these pressures that we put on ourselves. One of the things that I've had to learn, and what I coach my clients on, is like moving through that grief. You are going to have to go through all of the stages of the grief. It is like mourning a person who has passed, because you are not the same version. And so you do have to give yourself grace. I feel like there are days where it is debilitating and I'm not able to move. I might go into freeze mode, but I always go back to what is one action that I can take right now that is just going to help me get through the day. There is that notion of keep showing up, but also being aware of when you are not able to show up, because the energy that you give out is what you get back in. And so I do feel like moving through it is the only way that you're going to overcome it, because at the same time, you are evolving quickly and you have to put yourself in that uncomfortable space where you do have to face it. You do have to go through it all. And unfortunately, the only way to do it is to get through it.
Yeah. And when you get through it, the other side, you're going to be better for it, right? Like that's just, it's
Mm-hmm.
always how it is. Like the hardest
Mm-hmm.
way is through. And
Right.
that's how you get the experience. Like even going back to like hiring someone and it not working out or like, having to let someone go, like, the experience that you get from that is invaluable. And like we all make those mistakes and we become better for them, right? Like it's just
Exactly.
part of life and part of entrepreneurship. So,
Exactly.
who do you think you have to become to be a good leader? Like, what's the identity work underneath that?
So, one of the things that I feel is you have to learn who you are at your confident, most highest self. I do feel like when I think about what it would be like to be a leader that I would feel so proud of, that's the work that it is, having to let go of certain pieces that hold you back, while also shedding different layers of your past self, who you are now and then where you want to go. I do feel like it is a practice. It is something that you have to actively do all the time, because if you are not putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, you will never know what it is like to be a leader that can actually lead. And sometimes when you are in a crisis, that's when you learn how to lead the most. And I always say that when things are slow and when things are not working out, that's where you can see how you react, how you act, and where your leadership needs to evolve and shift, and the growth part of that. And so I always love to put myself in uncomfortable positions. I also really love when something uncomfortable happens to me, because I do feel like that is going to make me be the leader that I need to become, because without it, I wouldn't be here. But I do feel it is a practice. I always love, my coach has taught me to have, who do you need to be in order to have the things that you want? I don't know if you've ever heard of be, do, have, but I always think of, okay, who do I need to be? I need to be somebody who is committed to the vision. I need to be somebody who is confident in her decisions. I need to be somebody who is reliable. And it could also go back to your core values. And so I always think about those things of, what type of leader do I want to be? I want to be somebody who has integrity in all that she does. And that sort of shapes the way that I'm going to step up and lead. And I just feel like for women out there, you have to show up every day and show up in little ways, because that's really how you practice and you refine it.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I teach my clients. Going back to be, do, have, it's like you have to be the person before you have the thing. Like that's just how manifestation works. That's a concept from Jim Fortin, who's like an amazing manifestation teacher, right? And it's not about entrepreneurship. It's just like, that's how you create things. That is energy work. That's how it works. So what do you think the biggest struggle with being visible is for female leaders?
Oh my goodness. The biggest struggle I see is people in my world get really scared because they don't want to be seen like a fraud, don't want to be figured out. Sometimes they want to stay as a best kept secret. And also, this is a time where our visibility, if you are a person of color, is being attacked. And so I do feel like in the realm of visibility, if you put yourself out there, you are being subjected to being attacked. And that is the most scariest thing. I worked with a client who is from a family of immigrants, and he was worried about that because of the fact that she's putting herself out there. She's been in this country, but it's things like that you have to worry about. And so I do feel a lot of it, though, is if I start becoming visible, what does that mean for myself? What does that mean for my family and how I'm viewed? But I do feel that a lot of it has to be pertained to, am I worthy of being able to be seen? And what does it look like to be unapologetic? We are told as women that we are too much, that we can't rock the boat. I was told at such a young entrepreneur age that pink and my butterfly logo, it wasn't taken seriously. And so I do feel like women are scared to show up because they don't want to be perceived as too much. And it goes beyond just being on social media and marketing yourself. It is a true identity piece of what it means to be an unapologetic leader. And I do feel like those are the things that I see in the work that I do with my clients, is a lot of them have different ways of thinking about their visibility because there's so many different factors that come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the piece of being scared to be vulnerable, being visible, is also kind of the secret sauce. It's the missing piece, right? Because that vulnerability is what connects you to people.
Right. You know, it's funny that you say that, because I know that the best clients that I've connected with have found me because of something that I was doing that was very vulnerable. I had one client who told me, I hired you because you were very honest about the business partnership that you had to end. I'm going through that right now. I know that you're the right person for me because you went through it, and there's no one else that I would want to do that. And I think the scariest thing that I really had to confront in my own visibility was being vulnerable about all of the things that I was experiencing last year when my conference was not going well. And for a long time, I was like, oh, I can't share those things because I built this reputation, but I also really needed help and asking for help and telling people, obviously in a very strategic way, being very vulnerable and saying, this is not working. It is wrecking me. Even the vulnerability that I had to share about my fibroid surgery, it was so scary for me to do, but those pieces are what connects us. And we're living in a time where we are going to AI for so many things. We're having conversations with a robot and we're missing that human connectivity. An AI robot can give you information and maybe do a strategy, but working with somebody who has exact lived experience and has a philosophy and a framework is very different than going to an AI. And I think that those are the things that we have to remember now more than ever.
Yeah, such a good point. So important right now. So, talk to me a little bit about the visibility and leadership for your clients who are Latina, who are women of color, and what they're going through now, because I actually just did an interview with a DEI consultant, and we talked a lot about how to show up and express your values. And also, like, for example, like you mentioned, like you had a women's conference, or you can't say that you're women anymore. Like you can't use those inclusive terms, right? So tell me about the landscape of, yeah, your clients and how they're handling that.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been focusing on in our coaching sessions is what I like to call values-based visibility. And this is where you prioritize your own values in the work that you do as a CEO, as a founder, and really living out that truth in the way that you exude from being in person to being online and holding truth to those things. I do a lot of recalibration work. So it's women who are at a stage where they're recognizing that their own personal brand has evolved, and now they really need to take a step and figure out how do they want to double down on it, or is there something that they're not doing? Are they pivoting to a different offer? Are they pivoting to a different audience? But a lot of it has to deal with, these are my true values and this is what I feel confident in speaking up around, and I'm going to do that no matter what. And I do feel like we are at a time where the leadership is very different for these founders because they are going into rooms where they have to be careful with what they say, or they have to be careful of how they do it. And I do feel like with the work that I do, it's all going back to, what are your core values? How do you want to be visible? Where do you want to be when it comes to the organizations that you put your money behind, the organizations that you are a part of, doubling down on those things, because now more than ever, we do need more people to double down. We don't need people to back out. This is a time where people are really paying with their dollars. Like you saw the backlash with Target and different stores. And so it's figuring out like those things of, how do you want to lead your company and what does that look like for you based off of those values?
Yeah, absolutely. So how would you say you're leading yourself through this challenging political climate that we're in? Not just as a leadership and visibility expert, but as a Latina woman.
Yeah, I'm doubling down, because that's my whole mantra, is being an unapologetic leader, being unapologetically visible. And I think for me in particular, are things that I fully believe in, that I express in my coaching, that I express in all of the different ways that I've built my company. And so I'm very mindful of the organizations that I am supporting. I'm very mindful of the networking events that I'm going to. As somebody who built a conference where the bulk of the speakers and the audience was 98% women of color, I'm also very mindful of other conferences, of who they bring on their stage. I do feel like there have been times where I've gotten some flack. I feel in particular that we got to still be on the mic, on the megaphone, and preaching our stuff and really doubling down on these things, because if we're not doing it, then who will? And so for me in particular, I live in San Antonio, Texas. And so it's very important for me to be seen like that. And I feel like if there is a space that doesn't want that, then that's fine. Like, I'm not meant to be there. And I think that is something that I have really just felt that it is my duty to do that as somebody who preaches unapologetic visibility.
Yeah. I've had several clients who weren't necessarily be comfortable talking about their values and being a leader in the space and have felt called to over the last year, right? And are stepping up, and it's uncomfortable for them, and I just applaud them, right? Because they're moving in the right direction. How do you coach someone who is speaking up as a leader in their business for the first time?
One of the things that I always go back to is, how do you want people to feel? So from anything that you are doing, emotions is the number one thing that I think we have. And when you think about, how do you want to feel? What are the things that you want to convey? It always goes back to identifying those 4 to 5 core values, the things that you fully believe in. Because at the end of the day, if you start little by little speaking up, you can have that to back it up. What is your mission? What is your vision? So we kind of look there first of, okay, when we think about the mission of your company, the vision of why you are doing this, always going back to that, and start small. My mantra has always been the power of one. You don't need to have this big platform first to make a difference. Maybe it is starting with one conversation over coffee, of being able to speak up. Or maybe it is, I'm going to put something out there on social media that maybe identifies my values. And so you don't have to do it this big, a 360 thing, right? I always go, where can you make the most impact? Because you really can make an impact with just one person. Because as soon as you speak to that one person, you never know who they know that could amplify that visibility. So if you feel like, hey, this is too much for me, I can't go full in, then maybe it's partnering with somebody who has a better way to amplify your message. And so I would start first on coaching on that aspect of getting more comfortable with being a power of one before you kind of go full out.
Yeah, I think that's really practical and a good way to start, because I think there is this kind of like all or nothing. Like, you have to do the 360, right? And you have to be perfect, and that's not realistic, right?
No. Yeah, it took a lot for me at various moments. There would be times where I would just have a close friend circle on Instagram before I shared it with my whole entire audience, or I found it much easier to go on Threads and post, and that's where I would start finding different outlets and platforms that allow me to share my truth. And that's the one thing, is nobody can take your truth away from you, and you have to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're coaching, what is the most common struggle with leadership that you see?
Decision making, 100%. A lot of the clients that I coach, they struggle with, is this the right decision? They always want to be like, is this right for me? That's the hard part, because you don't know if it's right for you unless you actually do it. And so I see a lot of making just clear decisions. And also too, pricing is something that I see, and understanding how to make financial decisions for themselves and their company. I work with a lot of therapists. I work with a lot of web designers, service-based business owners. So a lot of it has to deal with, is this moving the needle in my business? And I think it all goes down to going back to self-trust and understanding how to put one foot forward in your decision making. And then also, the biggest struggle I see is they don't understand how to track their metrics, which is wild to me, because maybe I'm a data-driven person, so I work a lot with data. But some of the founders that I work with have never really tracked things in their life because that's not their expertise. And so I do see those are common challenges that I'm seeing in my clients, and understanding how to make data-driven decisions from what you are collecting.
Yeah. How do you get someone who hasn't collected the data to start analyzing and using it to make decisions?
Number one, you have to have some type of CRM system at this point. You do have to have some form of banking software. And so being able to say, what are you on? Are you on QuickBooks? Are you on any type of banking software or any type of financial software? And start understanding your numbers and how you are going to hit those goals. I always give my clients a spreadsheet that allows them to track their website views, their social media analytics, their finances. When are they making their most money? What does that look like from quarter to quarter? So that they can have a good idea of some of the shifts that they need to make in their business.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Love a good spreadsheet. So as a solopreneur, do you have any contract help now, or are you doing everything by yourself?
I have contract to help. So I normally outsource my bookkeeping. I do have an admin assistant, but I keep it mostly those two things. I definitely cannot do everything on my own. So having an assistant has been so helpful.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever go back to a model where you have employees?
Maybe. Never say never,
Yeah.
right? I think ultimately it depends on the season that you're in. I feel that that's what I'm learning so much. What season are you in the life that you want to lead? At this point in my life, it is not a dream to manage 50 employees. At one point, it was like, I want to have this big empire. And right now I'm like, what does sustainability look like for me right now? And so I think it ultimately is what season of life that you're in and being okay with that. I feel that the internet rewards scale, and we think about our businesses are failing if we're not scaling, and that's not true. Let's not believe in that. You can have a successful business as a solopreneur if you wanted to. There's no harm in staying that way. And I think that's something that I've had to learn and unlearn as I've grown in my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. Something that I saw a 7-figure entrepreneur post recently that I really look up to and mentor with a bit is she was saying that just because someone has a big audience or like does a lot of volume doesn't mean they're as profitable, and that there are businesses that are like much smaller than you would think that are making more money than these quote unquote big businesses, which I think is just such a good reminder.
We think that at a certain point in your business journey that if you hit a certain revenue number, you've made it. But I've spoken to so many women founders who haven't even turned a profit in 2 years. And they're living off of credit cards and loans. Don't believe everything that you hear on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my clients who is wanting to scale but is struggling with hiring and just kind of the identity shift of like she's never managed people. And it's like I told her, you get to choose your hard. Your hard can be giving up that idea and realizing that you like to do it yourself, or your hard can be learning to be this manager, learning to be this leader. One isn't right and one isn't wrong. You just have to decide which one's right for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And it could change, like, right? Like, just like you said, today, right now, it doesn't make sense for you to have employees, and maybe in 5-10 years, you'll change your mind. We don't know.
Right. And I think that's something that we have to remember as entrepreneurs, that it is okay to change your mind. I think one thing that I've learned is it was amazing for me to have a conference, to make it big. And at this season in my life, that's not what I want right now. And that is okay. You can always change your mind. I think that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur is you get to decide for yourself. No one else is telling you what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. How does someone know when they're ready to lead a team?
Number one, if you are recognizing that you are hitting specific bottlenecks, if you're recognizing that you need to start delegating, number one, I do feel, and I will say this till I'm blue in the face, you need to get a handle on your own operating system. So you need to know every single system and process. One, it makes training so much easier. But number two, you can be able to hand that off and not have to think as you go. So that would be a second thing. And then three, if you're really wanting to grow and 3x, 5x your revenue, you have to really be able to understand who are the people that are going to get you there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that you're reaffirming everything I tell my clients as they're listening right now. So what do you think the biggest lie entrepreneurs tell themselves about hiring is?
That's a great question. I think the biggest lie is that you will never find somebody that's as good as you.
Yes.
because I feel like that's such an ego thing that we go through of power. And you see it a lot in like older generations where they don't want to give up the power because they've been doing this for so long. And I do feel like it's almost a death of your ego, like the ego death, where you have to realize, hey, there might be somebody better at accomplishing this than I am. And I do feel that one of the things that I've seen, and even with myself, is I struggled so much with delegation because I'm a perfectionist. And if it didn't go my way, or if it wasn't like the way that I do it, it's not quote unquote good. And that's something that also I think we need to throw away, because at the end of the day, you're bringing on these people who can do it and they can do it well. And that's the beauty of having and leading a team, is you have people that can hold you accountable. You have people that can get the job done. And if there was anything that I learned from my experience, is you need to have people in place that are going to push you to be an even better leader, but also that can work with you in tandem to accomplish the goal. Because at the end of the day, that's what you're working on, is accomplishing that goal.
Yeah, love that. So good. So what do you think the most underrated leadership skill is?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think the underrated leadership skill is commitment to yourself and time management. We do not think about time in the way that we can get stuff done. But I also think too is the interpersonal skills of communicating and being an effective communicator is also one that I see, because I listened to a really great podcast today from the New York Times, The Daily, and they were talking about this AI essentially. And they were talking about just the way it's hindering our inner communication with other people and our personal skills and the ability to have that humanness to it. And I do feel like when we think about leadership, it all goes back to human emotion and human connectivity. And I think that those are the underrated skills, because like you said, vulnerability is a huge piece in being a leader. I never learned from a leader who was perfect at everything.
Right. Yeah. What is the best investment that you've made in your business this year?
A coach. I feel like a lot of my evolution, I could not do this alone. And there is a difference between coaching, strategy, advising, consulting. But I think one of the best things that I could have done for myself was recognizing that I needed a coach that was going to push me and to get me to a place where I could learn how to lead myself. And I will say it all the time, I'm so grateful that I made that investment and that I continue to make that investment, because it has paid off so much in my own growth and how I lead myself.
Yeah. Oh, love it. Coaches always love a coach, and I'm a coach who loves a coach too.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a favorite book you have on leadership or visibility that you would recommend?
I love Shonda Rhimes. I'm a huge Grey's Anatomy girl. The Year of Yes is one of my favorite books because, number one, we often put ourselves in situations where we don't want to say yes to things. And I feel like that in particular, that whole entire book of where she made it a point, she's this high-powered network television executive producer who would often say no out of uncomfortability. And I think that when you learn and be able to discern when to say no and when to put yourself in situations where you are saying yes, it truly makes a difference in how you lead.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I haven't read that one, so I'm going to add that to my list. So glad I asked. So the one question that I ask every single guest is, what is wealth to you?
Oh, I love this question because this is what I've been thinking about for probably the last 2.5 years. So for me, wealth is being able to wake up every day with the freedom and the flexibility, be able to be with my close family and friends. It doesn't have to deal with the accolades and money. Yes, you need money. When I think about just life, no one is going to remember the amount of money that you spent. Everybody is going to remember how much time that you spent with that person. If there's anything that I've learned in the last 2.5 years, is that money can go away at any moment, at any time, but your ability to spend time with your loved ones. I have the freedom right now. My parents do not live in the same city as me. And so as a business owner, I have the freedom to say, you know what, I'm going to go spend a whole entire week with my family and still run my business, still have the flexibility to take my work with me, right? I think about, as I pursue motherhood, what does that look like when I want to be able to go to my child's graduations or field trips or awards, right? And so I think, to me, it is thinking about more of connection and community and people, and having that wealth of the time that I will never have whenever they pass. So I think, to me, that I value way more than having a 7-8 figure business. It's simple.
The stuff that really matters. Love it. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Tell our listeners where they can find you, all the things.
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. I also have a podcast called Unapologetically Visible. New episodes come out every Thursday. It's a solo podcast. And then you can visit my website, www.thesocialbutterflygal.net.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Christina. This was so amazing. And until next week, everyone, happy manifesting. That's a wrap on today's episode. If you're still here, I know you're serious about quantum leaping your income, and that commitment is what separates the dreamers from the doers. Here's what I want you to do next. Pick one insight from today and take action on it. Because here's the thing, transformation happens in the implementation, not just the inspiration. If this episode shifted something for you, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. It helps other ambitious, heart-centered women find the show. And if you're ready to take this work deeper and finally break through that income plateau, I'd love to invite you to book a discovery call with me. Because here's the thing, podcasts give you the what, but coaching gives you the how. It's what takes you from, I know what I should be doing, to, holy shit, I actually did it. Head to the show notes or to jillianminter.com to grab your spot on my calendar. Until next week, keep choosing abundance over scarcity, alignment over hustle, and remember, you're meant for more. You just have to believe it's yours.